Hey guys, it's me, Kelly. I know you guys have been waiting for this for a very, very long time. I have Crrow777 on here with me to be interviewed today by popular request. I can't believe how many of you guys wanted him on here. I thought he was the bomb, and apparently all of you do as well. Maybe it was because I shared him so much on my Facebook. I'm not sure. But everything that I was trying to tell you guys about the moon, about other things, was backed up by science, by Crow. Now, I just want to let you guys know before this starts, for security reasons, we are not showing Crow's face or revealing his identity, and I will let him explain a little bit more about that when he comes on here. But I'm very, very thankful to have him on the show to hopefully answer some of our questions, a lot of them about the moon. So without further ado, here is Crow.
Howdy, and thanks for having me, Kelly. To harp on what you just said, it's kind of funny, actually, because I had, I don't know, 50, 60 private messages on YouTube of your followers urging me to contact you, which is why I finally did. I wasn't sure that we had that much in common, but, you know, once I talked to you on the phone, here we are. So we can start off with, maybe I'll just tell people how I got started.
That'd be great.
I've been filming probably since early in 2012, nearly nonstop. The sky, the moon, the planets, chemtrails, things of this nature. In 2012, everything changed when I filmed the now kind of infamous lunar wave, which shows what appears to be a refresh wave, actually two waves going across the moon. My further backstory is that I acquired my first big telescope, 8 inches, in 1995, which was when I started basically being an amateur astronomer. But what I'll do here is I'll run a video real quick so people can see. Let me see. I'm new at this. Okay, give me just a second.
I'll flip over to my picture while you're trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready? Okay.
Let me know when you can see the Luna Incognita.
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, so basically, this little clip is going to show how my original system is set up to film the sky. And one of the things I'm kind of known for is the quality of the video I produce. And a lot of folks, since they have been following me, have gone out to buy telescopes and start. So I always like to show this little piece of footage just to kind of show what goes into it. What you're looking at here is I'm just grabbing the cardinal points of the compass. And actually, you're going to see me make a mistake here in a second and mislabel two directions. But it really doesn't matter. I just need to know where south is to do this kind of an alignment with my telescope. So back maybe 2 years ago, this was the system that I was still using, the one that I purchased in 1995, good old American-made equipment that you can't really get your hands on anymore. This is a fully robotic tracking 8-inch telescope. And what I do is align it to the sky so that the scope tracks anything I point it at. And then I put a DSLR camera on the back that shoots high-definition video. This is just kind of a shot of the outback, not too far from my house. Okay, so I'm almost set up here. What most people find interesting is when I acquire the moon in this shot. This is just all the electronics that get set up. There's the DSLR camera. Basically, I take off the lens, and the telescope is going to become the lens of that camera. This is a light filter for city lights. It kind of knocks out sodium light and kind of light bulb light from the city. And there the camera goes on the back of the scope, making the telescope just one big telephoto lens. And there's a moonrise getting ready to shoot. All right, so in these days, what I was doing is putting a laptop onto the camera so that I have a bigger view of the moon, using the laptop as a monitor. Currently, I have a much bigger scope, and I use basically a big TV monitor so that I can see really well. So what you're going to see here is the moon is up there in the sky, and I'm going to acquire it by pointing the telescope at it, and then it will all be visible on the monitor. There's the moon up in the sky, and this is the part people kind of find fascinating when you see the camera acquire the moon. There's the moon, and I do a little zoom with the camera there so that I can get a good focus. And so this clip's just about over, so I'll let it run. And there it is, all the way to the monitor so you can see how it's done. But anyhow, I'll hand it back over to you.
Fabulous. I am such not a technical person. Everybody knows that about the Kelly. And my husband, though, he's a MacGyver, and he would be able to follow everything that you've done. For years, I have tried to set up, without spending like probably as much money as you did, I have tried to set something up to be able to view the moon and the planets and all that, to get a better view, because several years ago, in the middle of the night, I got called outside, and so I went outside, and it's like, what is going on? And I just get this message that we want to show you something. So I look up and I see this, what I thought was a star at first, and it's not. It was flashing like blue, red, green, and white. So I got my Canon Sure Shot out that has a good zoom on it, and I zoomed in, and I saw what looked like a spaceship. It looks. I don't watch. I haven't watched television for like 10 years or so. So I can't remember what kind of cars these are, but like the race cars that have the really long nose on it. It was shaped very similar to that. So I have been photographing some really strange things in the sky. I have almost 3 million pictures of orbs, mostly debris and dust and moisture, but a lot of orbs. So I've been trying to capture these things. I've been taking pictures of the moon. About the only thing that I can capture on the moon is this aura around it. It will have like a golden and purple aura around the moon. I'm able to capture that in some pictures. But I wanted to do more with the planets, to try and look at the planets better and to try and look at the stars better. Because one night when I came out, I was looking at Orion's belt, and I was like, okay, something is weird about Orion's belt. Orion's belt are supposed to be stars, is what I've learned. And when I started photographing Orion's belt, they looked more like spaceship. And then I went out another night, and Orion's belt was stars again. So I've seen some really strange stuff in the sky that I have wanted to photograph. Is there some place that they can go where you have a list of equipment that's required or that you recommend for them doing their own sky watching?
Well, generally what I do is I just address it. The problem is that there's so many options out there. I will say to everyone, do not buy Meade equipment. They have just gone south. Now, the telescope you saw me set up was back in the days, good old American-made steel and everything. That thing is a tank, but that is no longer the case with Meade. I usually tell people, look at Celestron, because the smaller scopes are affordable. The main thing to understand is that you don't need a very big scope to get a great view of the moon and the planets. If you go maybe 4 inches, a 4-inch scope, you'll have a great view. If you're just using a camera, cameras and telephoto lenses will do it, but you've got to use a tripod. And then if you want to put a camera on a telescope, it's, you saw how I did it. It's just a simple little connector thing that costs about 20 bucks called a T-ring. And that will get you on your way. The main thing is that with smaller scopes, you will not be tracking the sky, although some of the smaller scopes do. That's basically what I tell people, because depending on where you are, when you go to look at these things, there's just so many options that I basically steer people away from Meade, steer them towards Celestron, because it's a good American company, mostly. and that's how you get started.
Oh, fantastic. So budget-wise, could I do this under $2,000?
Easily. You could do it for,
Really?
I mean, the new scope that I have, you're looking at scopes after that 8-inch, I went up to 12 inches and remain in that area. You're looking at a $4,000-ish investment, depending on what you get. So for $2,000, you could walk away with a fully tracking, probably even, I'm guessing, somewhere between a 4-inch and a 6-inch scope. And actually, if you shop used, you could almost certainly get up to 8 inches buying used scopes for that kind of money.
The reason that I wanted a Crow on the show to interview is because there are a lot of people that are talking about all of this, but you have got what I call scientific proof. I use scientific proof loosely because science is basically the study of this dimension. And therefore there are some flaws. But you had said something about science that and I thought it was really, really cool because I've noticed about science, having a scientific background, dealing with vitamins and biochemistry and all that, that you would try to do experiments and you would go on, someone's theory of things, and then things just didn't go right. So that told me that these theories, there was something wrong with the theories in the first place, that we didn't have a good base to work on. So is that kind of your line of thinking with science, that basically we've been lied to
Well,
about? What's your take on that?
here's what I would say about science. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Science gave us the ability to drive in cars, have a refrigerator, and have air conditioning. So clearly you can see how applied science does a lot to shape our world. But in the same breath, I will say that I view science a bit like a religion. It's a club, and there are rules. As in religion, you're allowed to believe and say certain things depending what religion you're a member of. Science is no different. And as an example of this, take the moon landings. The moon landings are demonstrably you can show provably that what we have been handed as evidence of a moon landing was faked in a soundstage. On my channel, I just posted work from a guy who was a PhD at a Ukrainian university, I think a former member of that university, and he used what's called a stereoscopic method, which is basically using parallax on all the imagery that we've been given, where it allows you to take a couple images and then gauge the distance of things in the background. And in certain shots where the astronauts are supposed to be standing 5 kilometers in front of a mountain range, he demonstrated that this was done on a soundstage, and it's about 1,000 yards to those set pieces that are mountains. And so what we find is that if science would take a look with their critical eye and their scientific method at the moon landings, they would absolutely be able to prove that what we have been handed is false. Yet what we find is that as a member of the scientific community, it is almost a religious belief that that is not even questioned in the first place. It is just simply accepted as a truth. And so there's kind of the conundrum of where we find ourselves with science.
Oh, absolutely. And when you go and look at the plant, like where I grew up with the Clovis Indians, it's basically there was nothing here before the Clovis Indians. Like, they were the first ones here. And any of the archaeologists or scientists that show evidence that there was anybody here before the Clovis Indians gets all their funding pulled. So, and that's how you have a lot of control in the scientific community, is taking their money away.
Well, that's the enforcement system. There's not a university in existence in this country anyhow that is not dependent on funding, which simply means you do what they want you to do or you have no money to do anything. And so this is kind of the watchdog placed around, the things that are studied and the things that aren't studied.
So we've got Chris Garner over here. He's like, I finally, we've got a Crow on here. Yeah, they had been trying, just trying to email bomb you, and sorry for that.
They did.
They were like, we want him on here, and I was like,
I heard them loud and clear.
Yeah, I love it. We've got a lot of questions regarding the moon.
Go ahead.
This is now you come from the scientific background, and as you're aware, I have a lot of the psychic community, the ones that have a really high level of awareness, that follow what I do and all my craziness and experimentation and falling on my face and getting back up. But we we all figured this out together. Um, and in all this, we have a lot of people who have been remote viewing. We look at things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you know, and there's a lot of information out there, even carved into pyramids and everywhere that says, besides the obvious that the moon never rotates, that basically says that the moon is not what you think it is. That this appears to be something very, very artificial, and it's not just this floating rock in the sky. So I know this is a big elephant to eat, but what bite do you want to take first on the moon?
Well, I mean, if you have people asking questions, I'd be happy to address them. Either way you want to go.
On the moon, this was just from my experience because I didn't know whether it was remote viewing or astral projection. I think it was astral projection because when I got there, they could see me. So that tells me that the moon is in a much higher dimension than the third dimension. It's not like this floating rock that's in our dimension, that it's in the fourth dimension or higher. And what it appears also, because most people cannot see the fourth, fifth, or higher dimensions, but I'm trying to teach them to so they can, but they can't see it. So it appears that there is a type of holographic skin that is over the moon. And this is something that was really exciting when I saw your footage. Because to me, you know, I'm not really a technical person, but just what I know, I looked at that and went, aha. That seems to prove what I suspected in the first place.
Well, you know, the way you described your audience, I would imagine that many of them are familiar with the Kabbalion or the Emerald Tablets. I would also state for the record that I spent many years and have read probably thousands of books studying Tibetan Buddhism at one point in my life. I've done similar things with the Bible that we use primarily in this country. Having said this, in the ancient teachings, which are not very mainstream, which a lot of people in a more spiritual community are familiar with, like the Kabbalion or the Emerald Tablets, there are 7 ancient truths, one of which is about vibration, correspondence, these types of things. When I filmed the lunar wave on the moon and I began to dig into what had happened, and I came to the point where I proved it was a filmed event local to the moon and independent of any equipment malfunction, I had endless lines of people looking at that footage. The problem was no one was going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I had CCD chip designers, PhD physicists, just people from everywhere amazed, but none of them were willing to go on the record because of their jobs or the community they worked in. Many reasons, which is understandable. What finally happened was this year, a few months ago, I was sent an email, and in that email was Russian text. Now, I translated the Russian text and came to understand that it appeared to be a chat room with 3 people in it. I think 2 of them were male, 1 of them was female, but what popped out and slapped me in the face was the word lunar hologram. In this chat room conversation that was sent to me, 2 people were talking matter-of-factly about how the moon was a hologram and how that everybody who knows anything anywhere in the world understands that the Apollo missions were faked. Now, there was a 3rd person, I think a female, in this conversation who was saying, it's the first I've heard of it. So links were passed around. One of these links led me to what I consider to be a big breakthrough. It took me to the work of a man who died in 2011. His name was Alexander Katim, or Katim Alexander. And his nickname, I believe, is Hadibov. Now, this gentleman was a Russian researcher who held secret positions throughout his life. In his biography, they won't even list the places. But what hooked me was that the first thing that I saw from this link, getting it translated, and it's very difficult to translate technical Russian. I'm still trying to get good translations, is that he was describing what I had come to know of the moon. He described the moon as having 2 faces, an outer that we see and an inner that we do not see. I had come to understand that filming the lunar wave was most likely near a full moon. Hadibov said that it was in the 3rd phase all the time or near full until 2012. I had come to understand that the lunar wave would occur near equinoxes. Hadibov said not only near equinoxes, the big deal is the vernal equinox and the month to Easter following that equinox. And these three things that I had come to understand were completely paralleled in this Russian research. So at that point, I finally came out and made the clip, which kind of changed my channel, to be honest. I had a pretty civil channel up until the point that I stated flat out that the moon is an illusion and that nobody goes above low Earth orbit. So that's kind of where things have come recently, and why I finally took the full step of saying, to some degree, what I have come to believe. You know, I spend a lot of time trying to inform people, to help them kind of wake up to a reality they're unaware of. And in doing this, I measure what I say. I don't want to say things that are so outlandish that people turn off, because then I've kind of done them a disservice. So what I've tried to do is just kind of a slow progression up to where I'm at. And to be honest, I still have quite a ways to go.
Yeah, yeah, you do. And I hope you get there because this is going to be really exciting when you get this information out. Um, so you kind of started in the direction of talking about possibly an enclosed system. I interviewed Mark Sargent recently, and he cites your work a lot. He is very impressed with your work and puts it out there. And I'm not sure what all your theories are, what you believe and don't believe. That's up to you to tell people. But when I was researching the flat Earth theory and all of the information, it made such sense to me. And all of these questions that I had, growing up and being in school and just, looking at things, it really made sense that this planet could be an enclosed system. Now, in my astral travels and remote viewing and all that, there is definitely something outside of, if this is an enclosed system, that this mimics. There is something outside of that, and I've traveled all through it. So I guess this is a multi-part question. If this is an enclosed system, why? Are they taking us somewhere? Who is in charge? If anybody, I'm sure somebody is in charge, and on what level? And what is this enclosed system? Because when I died and popped out of my body, I went through a membrane that was almost like a dark dome, if you will, that was over this planet that I used to think was round. And you look back and see this dome. So, all these things are going like, something's not right. This is not what they have taught us in school, even about our own planet. So what is your direction or your theories, or what proof do you have scientifically about us being in what you call an enclosed system? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's what I say. And just to be very clear for people, I'm aware that Mark has cited me, and actually he's asked me to do an interview on a radio show he has now. Not bad for a guy who's 3 months out of the gate, but anyhow, I will be doing a radio show with Mark next Sunday or something. Actually, I think it's pre-recorded. I don't know when it's going to happen. This is what I'll say. You will never find me in the flat Earth argument. People have tried to draw me in, and all I see in the concave, convex, flat Earth, all these groups, is I see a bunch of people fighting about the very same thing. What I have gone on the record as saying is that it is perfectly clear that our world has been misdescribed to us. Now, you see so many people making models and doing all these things, and part of my problem with that is you see nobody doing hands-on stuff, experiments with sextants, anything. Any of the experiments you would expect folks to do to go out and start to demonstrate their models. But to me, making a model of the Earth is not important. What is important is demonstrating to people that what we have been told is incorrect. Now, you mentioned an enclosed system. I will absolutely state for the record that this is a closed system and that nobody leaves. I will further state that nothing goes above low Earth orbit in my view, and I don't even think that we can consider low Earth orbit as what we would think space is. But again, space is pretty much an image that has been placed in our minds by television, movies, NASA, over a lifetime. It's a bit like dinosaurs. You've never seen one, but what you think of dinosaurs was an image that was given to you. But having said this, there are some simple things people can consider to think about the enclosed system. One of the easy things to do is go look at rocket launches. If you go look at rocket launches, and actually there's a very good example. If you go to YouTube and you type in rocket launch filmed from a plane, someone stuck a camera out a window while a rocket was being launched. And what you see is almost immediately after takeoff, rockets arc out over the ocean. There's also footage out there. I think another guy, you know what, I'm not even going to mention his name because I don't appreciate what he does so much. But the rocket is shown taking off, arcing out, and in one point of the footage, you can actually see the rocket going down. Now, the reason I bring this up is on my channel, I have filmed things that are posted for people to view that are seemingly in a weightless environment. Not too long ago, I filmed an object with 3 kind of rocket thrusters on it coming back down. It came in front of the moon as I was filming the moon. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because I can easily film something outside of where our atmosphere is supposed to be. Low Earth orbit, it's about 160 miles, we're told. Those numbers kind of vary, but I have the equipment that can see that far. I could even film something in low Earth orbit. So the simple question I ask is, how come no one has ever filmed a rocket leaving our atmosphere? If I can do it with my no budget tools, how the heck come someone like NASA or someone inside has not filmed this momentous event where a human being is leaving the bubble of our planet into outer space? And the reason is because they can't do it. Now, if I take a minute to hark back what I was saying about vibration, which is kind of covered in Kabbalion, Emerald Tablets, these ancient texts that a lot of people read, in the Russian research I was mentioning, he describes what you began to describe as octaves, which correlates pretty closely with vibration. What he put forward, and again, this is not my research, this is from a gentleman who held secret positions. I don't know how you ever vet it, but I will state what he says. He says that we are tuned, physically tuned to the octave of this planet. Now that in itself, if you consider it, is about like putting you in prison. Because if you are tuned to this and the moon is tuned another way, it means that whatever or whoever is on the moon does not have the ability to come here, and we do not have the ability to go there. And when I read that description, I thought it was a pretty apt description, keeping in mind what we have read from ancient texts on vibration, correspondence, karma, gender, these 7 ancient laws which pretty much permeate everything, even modern science, although modern science changes what those things are called because they clearly don't want you looking back to ancient wisdom, which will also include, astrology, the forerunner of astronomy, and alchemy and things like this.
I just love it when I have brilliant people on this show. This is awesome. This is fantastic. Now you're talking about tuned into an octave. Could another vocabulary word to insert in that be dimension? Maybe?
I suppose you could, because what we hear people, when they speak of dimensions, basically what they're saying is it's vibrating at a different level. Or its frequency, which is also, in fact, a bit like a vibration. As a radio operator in the Marine Corps, frequencies, if you look at a wave hitting the ocean, that wave is similar to any radio wave. And frequencies could be thought of as a vibration if you consider the amplitude of a wave. The point is when people speak about dimensions, you typically hear that frequency is higher, so we can't see it, or their vibration is higher, so we can't see it, which is basically the same. I saw an interview with a brilliant man. You just called me brilliant? Well, let me tell you something. I'm not even in preschool compared to this gentleman. And he's an expert on everything electrical, and he's kind of like a modern day Tesla, but maybe something more. And what he said is that it is all basically electromagnetic energy. And so he equates music, light, all of it as electromagnetic energy. So, your question was, about dimensions. So the answer is yes, absolutely. You could consider frequency, vibration, octave, even correlate music with this kind of thinking.
This is so cool. We've got some questions over here. Is it true that the moon influences what we see on Earth? If the moon was disabled, would we see the Earth differently too? And they're probably referring to the movie. Is it He Lives? I'm trying to remember the movie
They
where
live.
they live, where he puts on the special sunglasses and he can see that everybody is an alien. So there's a belief out there that the moon controls a lot of things, or brainwashes, whatever you want to call it, everybody on this planet. So what have you found out anything
So
scientifically to support
I'll,
that?
I'll answer that in two parts. I'll start with the Russian research. The Russian research claims absolutely that what we call the moon and sea is a bit of a facade. I have used the word hologram, which is incorrect, but we have no other word for it. But I have changed to call what we see a facade. He claims there's a control center being hidden behind that. And it's, I guess, a bit like a black cube, although the translations make it very difficult to understand for sure if he's saying it's a black cube. Getting back to my research, what I had come to believe, I believe that the moon is covering a control system that is tied to the sun. The two things that we see that are absolutely part of this system we live in are the sun and the moon. I believe there's a correlation between them. Having said this, many people come and are just shocked that I've told them that the moon you see up there is not a rock orbiting in space. And then they say, how are the tides controlled? It's a fair question, I guess. The point is that the tides are here. We can see them, but they are not controlled by gravity of some rock called the moon in space. In my view, there is a control system that is controlling much of what we see. And to take this a step further, I began to question, well, wait a minute. If these things are true, was there ever a time here before the moon? And what I quickly found was, just using literature that's very old on this planet, I found that there is an endless line of Roman, Greek scholars, philosophers that taught their students that there was a time before the moon. Hippocrates, Aristotle, Censorinus, there's a whole long list of them. They were telling their students there was a time before the moon when a people named the Arcadians lived. Now, for anyone who follows Renaissance art, you will see the word Arcadian coded into a lot of things. I think there's even a painting by a guy named Poussin standing in front of a tomb that says something to the effect of Et tu Arcadia or something like this. I've forgotten. Point is, they also taught about a people called the, God, I'm going to get this name wrong, the Pleistocene. The name of that people translates to a time of people who lived before there was a moon. Now, coming up into a more modern age, the Caldera Indians of Colombia, when they talk of the early history of their people, they refer to themselves as the people who lived here before there was a moon in our sky. The Mayans, now this is interesting, they talk about a time when Venus, which phases in the same way the moon does, ruled the sky before there was a moon. So what I came to understand is there is plenty of historical reference to a time without a moon that was seemingly a better time, a more golden age, if you will. But getting back to the Russian research, it almost seems like he is saying that the moon is so integrally tied to our life support system even, that if it was to go away, everything would fail. Don't know if that's true, but that is what the Russian research says. So from my point of view, the thing that looks like a rock up there is a facade covering a control center, and that control center runs a heck of a lot of what we see down here.
Oh boy, because we've been talking about trying to disable the moon and and all that, so it doesn't sound like that should be a path that we go down.
I don't know, if you're going to throw a monkey wrench in a machine, it's probably good to understand what the machine does first.
Yeah, yeah, that's very important. So I'm glad I had you on the show before we started monkeying around with the moon. Oh, that would be something.
That's the Russian research, by the way. And the truth is that I'm just an average person. I will never be able to vet much of what is said there in my lifetime. You know, at one point in this man's life, his research was forced out of his hands sometime before he died in 2011. and it was forced over to Israel with an oil company involved.
Wow. That is very interesting. Hmm. Ooh, the tangled web we weave. This says, "Oh, the black cube. Have you heard of the black cube of Saturn?"
Yes, I mean that's a pretty popular meme on YouTube and in the conspiracy kind of world where everybody talks about the Illuminati, yet nobody really seems to know who or what the Illuminati is. The black cube is clearly a basic tenet of the deceptive control system we see down here, even to the point where there are endless cube statues placed in key places around this planet. If you go on YouTube and search for black cube or cube sculpture, you'll get a whole list of these things. And when you discover where it is they're placed, you'll begin to realize that there is absolutely something about six-sided objects that corresponds very closely with our deceptive world.
Yeah, you see them in front of large corporations, at the center of belief systems or religious systems. You see those suckers everywhere.
Well, even the Holy Cross folds up into a cube.
True that. Didn't even think about that. There's geometry in action. Now, what about the International Space Station? They're asking. I've seen some clips where the women will have their hair and kind of spray it up, standing up, where it looks like they're in zero G. So how do they fake these space station interviews?
Well, most famously, the Chinese, who are now doing the latest fraud with the moon, were caught red-handed passing off astronauts in a pool footage and telling people that they were in space. It's a kind of ironic that in the Bible, the firmament, which is absolutely, if you look at the definition, something firm, divides the waters from the waters, and yet all our astronauts seem to use the same language and suits that one would use to go underwater. It's very ironic. When you're in space, you're floating. It goes on and on, but there's plenty of footage out there showing astronauts in pools with bubbles present. And not only that, if anyone's seen the tank where the mock ISS is, submerged so they can practice, there is a massive green screen in that pool that is always cut out of the shots, but you can find pictures. To get back to your question, the ISS is a fraud. I have no idea what we are seeing when we see it transit the moon. It looks like it should look, but for those who don't know, the ISS transits the moon in less than 1 second. It goes by that quick. Point is, how should I address this? You asked me how they're filming it. There's a lot of people saying they're doing it on wires, they're doing it in pools, they're doing it other ways. There's so many videos on YouTube that do a pretty good job of describing the fraud that is being presented to you, even to the point where I was sent a video recently of an astronaut talking about the new Orion program and stating verbatim that they do not have the ability to leave low Earth orbit, and that's what Orion is all about, that maybe someday they can leave low Earth orbit, which is a bit of a smack in the face considering endless Apollo missions, we are told, went much further than low Earth orbit. So I guess, does that answer the question?
I think it does, and more. This is very interesting. I'm liking this. I've watched a lot of your videos, but you have got so much more information than you've got on your videos as well. So this is amazing.
You got to stick one toe in the pool at a time, or people run.
That is true. That is true. Now, I don't want you to ruin your credibility or anything like that, but you have an audience that goes beyond science. So anytime you want to throw something out there, they can. Don't worry, they can handle it. Is the moon completely fake, or is it real with a more holographic, although everything is holographic, film over it that's used to manipulate energies to the Earth? Are there any energies from the moon that are safe? So this is slightly the same question, but in a little different way.
Well, again, the Russian research, and again, this is not my research, talks about radiation that is shed from the moon, and he equates it with when the moon is full, you're getting 100%. When it's half, you're getting half of it. But what he says is that radiation is tuned to our octave, so it harms us not. No harm done. That's how he describes it. Now, to answer the first part of that question, in my view, what we see is a facade. I don't even think it's really possible to land on it per se. I think it's simply there to screen. Now, here's a thought experiment you can do. Since I have been filming since 2012, I've probably seen 100 fireballs that we were told are meteors coming from the sky, right? Now, when I look at the moon, I see this pockmarked, bombarded surface that we are told has been hit endlessly with space rocks. In all the thousands of hours of filming I have done, I have never seen a single thing change or hit the surface of the moon, to include when we were told NASA was crashing things that are in orbit, including the Chinese. Now, to take this a step further, there is no atmosphere, we are told, on the moon, and it is covered in 4 inches or something like this of a fine powder. So if anything hit, you'd see quite a plume, and since there's no atmosphere, that plume would be very visible. So what someone did on my channel when I made these statements was went out and dug up this low-quality black and white footage that they called 4K video, kind of laughable, of an object hitting the moon where you see a bright dot for about 4 frames. Clearly fake video. And my point is if we are constantly hit with space rocks and we have an atmosphere, how in the heck can we see a completely unchanging moon decade after decade after decade? It's not possible, because the one thing that is true of life is change, except for the moon. That sucker doesn't change. If it was 15 the first time we saw it, it's still 15 today. Hasn't aged a bit.
Yeah, that's a dangerous age when you have children. 15. The room never gets clean.
The moon's a dangerous thing.
I think you're right about that.
Nothing good for us.
Now, the distance. This is something I always had a problem with. Is in school you learn that the moon is so far away and the sun is so far away. And I don't think that's true. There's a lot of things that have been telling me that is not true. And then I was watching one of your videos. You can say this a lot more scientific than I can, but you basically took a dot on the moon, and it was something like a crater or something like that, and you took something of an equal size and put it on the sun, and you were able to manipulate it over a program that you had on the internet, and to put it so far away to see if you can still see that spot on there. And when you got to, now correct me if I'm wrong, I know I've got this wrong. I understood the big picture of what you were saying. I can't remember all the scientific details, but you got it to play the Earth to a place where the moon should be, like that distance away, and there's no way you could even see that dot on planet Earth. So this was just like you were saying, not really a science experiment, but maybe like a thought experiment.
Yeah.
So that was like, okay, what I'm thinking is probably true then, that these are not where they say they are. So where are they?
Well, what we can do is, first of all, the video, there's 2 videos back to back on my channel called How Far Away is the Moon? That's the title. On the first one, I used the example of a 16-mile wide crater. But then as I thought about it one night as I was viewing, I realized you have to have almost eagle-eye vision for anyone to detect it with an unaided eye. So what I did is I updated it with the following video, and I used the crater Aristarchus. Aristarchus is like this white dot that everybody sees. I looked at it, and the crater is not 40 miles, but there's like the white that is around it in some images, and every image you see is different, is 40 miles. So what I did is I went into Google Earth, and I made a 40-mile wide circle. And then I zoomed away from the Earth as much as Google Earth will let me, which is 40,000 miles. At 40,000 miles, you cannot detect this dot anymore. And the moon, we are told, is 6 times further. And so it just kind of demonstrates that when you look at what you've been told, you find problems. And it's pretty clear to me that the moon is not 250,000 miles away. I stumbled on this one day when I was filming chem planes, and I calculated that some of them were 7 to 9 miles high. And some of these planes, I couldn't see any detail on. I couldn't see any color. It was just this gray plane that you could barely even see because it was 7 to 9 miles away, which has got me thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm filming the moon. It's crystal clear, and that's nearly 250,000 miles away. And that's when I came up with the thought experiment to demonstrate that, we just get told a lot of fairy tales over and over again until that fairy tale becomes the truth we live by.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing. And we've got some questions over here. There's about 4 or 5 questions, kind of jumbled together.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find the one on where I was talking about the sun. Let's see. I'll have to come to that one in a minute. Now this one, we're going to get back to this in a second. I know of a study done on the Van Allen belt that proves there is an unbreakable barrier. Could this be the membrane that Kelli remembers seeing? Because I don't have vocabulary. After I came back, I had to make up vocabulary. Also, if the things are supposed to, I'm sorry, the things we are supposed to see are attached on the membrane. Attached,
Well,
maybe
let
they
me
mean like a computer screen or a monitor or something.
Yeah, let me take that backwards. I think the second part of that question is someone doing a good job of critical thinking. As a matter of fact, that very idea was just echoed in a television show called Ascension, where in essence what they had done is locked people in a basement in a spaceship, convincing them they were in outer space, and they had a planetarium around them which projected everything they saw. So I appreciate that individual comment because it shows that that individual is trying to think beyond what we have been told is possible. The first part of that question, and refresh my memory, was what was the first thing that she asked?
It was on the
Okay,
Van
yeah.
Allen belt.
Okay, so the Van Allen belts. I did a clip on this. It's one of my least favorite clips because I'd injured my leg and I couldn't sit to edit for very long. So put it this way, that clip is not up to par. Here's my view of the Van Allen belts. We were told up until recently that there was a couple of Van Allen belts, but also all of a sudden, magically, some months ago, they found a third one, and it was described as a glass wall in space. Well, my first problem with that is how the hell are you discovering anything when you've sent astronauts through it numerous times? I think what the Van Allen belt is an excuse to cover up whatever that thing is that prevents us from going beyond low Earth orbit. And I will further say, if NASA says something, my immediate response is BS. Pardon my French, but it does not matter what they say, what image. They have lied so many times that to accept anything, including a description of Van Allen belts, is akin to being insane because you've been lied to so many times. How can you do anything but out of the gate say, I do not believe you? And when you come to do this over a long period of time, you begin to actually see things in a new way because you're not allowing them to draw a false picture in your head. As far as I'm concerned, NASA's description of the Van Allen belts might as well have been presented by a guy smoking opium in a dark cave. Don't buy it.
Yeah, like most of the things we learn, it's like, how do you know? I remember sitting in school, and they're like, okay, there's this hard, core to the Earth, and then all this, gooey hot stuff around it, and the crust, and I'm like, so who's been there? They're like, nobody. I'm like, how do you know if nobody's been there? And this is exactly Saturn and what it's made of and what's in the center of it. Really? How do you know the temperature on Saturn?
It's funny you mentioned that because it just demonstrates how much of what we accept as fact is actually just a theoretical thing that's been made up to explain something they know nothing about. To put this in context, as I was doing my research about a time before a moon, I wanted to look at what NASA's explanation for how the moon got here was. So NASA presents 5 explanations, but here's the kicker.
5.
Yeah, 5 of them. But the first 4 are so problematic that they had to come up with a 5th one in 2010 or 2012, which demonstrates that the previous 4 are false. And the truth is the last one that they proposed in 2012 or whenever it was recently is so problematic that it's no different. So again, we have this thing that we can all see endlessly. We have telescopes that are massive on this planet, and they can't possibly tell you how it got here.
Yep, that is kind of interesting, isn't it? The lie goes on and on and on. Now, here's something. This is, I guess this goes in kind of like the skeptic category. And I've watched enough of your videos that I know that these waves are not heat waves. It's not, you know, the technical terms, but not a camera anomaly or a lens anomaly. But we do have and he even starts with my apologies because he's, you know, he's trying to get a hold of this.
No
But
worries.
the holographic waves you saw moving upward are, in my opinion, heat waves in the Earth's atmosphere that distort the moon's appearance. So, what is the best way to tackle this? Because I've watched so much of your stuff that it makes sense to me that this is not the camera, this is not heat waves, that you are actually seeing something on there. So,
Okay, so the 2012 footage, the first footage that I shot at the fall equinox of 2012, right before the full moon, is the best footage by miles. We do not have existing footage that I'm aware of that even approaches the caliber of that footage. Having said this, there are two pieces of wave footage that were shot early enough in the night that there is enough ambient light in the clip. Now, at the time when you saw me set up my scope, you saw that little light filter. To your eye, it makes the sky look darker sooner than it actually is. But in the 2012 footage and one other piece of footage that was shot at 8:30 at night in September, there was enough ambient light. What a video engineer helped me do was use gamma and some other techniques and add noise to demonstrate that the wave does not cross the video frame. If we were looking at a heat wave, the wave would cross the video frame. It's completely local to the moon. And further, you can actually measure the curvature of the wave, and there's an energy pulse in the lower left limb of the moon in the 2012 footage that demonstrates curving lines traveling over a sphere. So that's basically a bulletproof example of how we know with two of the clips that the wave is not crossing the video frame.
that is very interesting. Man, we've got a lot of questions over here. Is that, I mean, is that all you wanted to say about it? Because that makes sense.
Well, it's kind of bulletproof. And what happens is a lot of people look at the footage and they say it's dark, you can't tell. But again, you know, a video engineer is the guy who showed me how to do this. And it's ironic that when he chose that footage and I went back and looked at the two clips this was possible, they were both early evening shots. The primary one that matters was shot at 8:30.
And people have been able to replicate this.
I'm sorry?
People have been able to replicate this. I mean, that's part of science. If only you do it, nobody else can do it. Well,
oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, we've got 9 people now who have filmed the lunar wave 13 times. I filmed it personally 5 times. The first time that I filmed it in 2012, I shot nearly nonstop, and I saw nothing until a year and a half later, just before the spring equinox of 2014. But you've got to keep in mind, we have some lunar wave captures that are close up to the moon, so you see a lot less of them, and nothing compares to the 2012 footage. And in the Russian research, he says that the lunar wave will occur in the third phase of the moon or near full until 2012. And to this day, that footage stands head and shoulders above everything else we've got.
Mm-hmm. And to me, it just makes common sense. I haven't seen everything that you have, but of the videos that I've seen, these two waves seem to be just about the same distance apart every time. And when you're dealing with heat waves, things are not very consistent. I've done a lot of photography dealing with heat waves and things like that, and I can't see how in the world this would be a heat wave.
Well, what you'll notice, the 2012 footage is a good example. Many hundreds of people have noticed this and commented that as the wave goes by, everything behind that wave appears to shift a couple of pixels over, almost like it's a refresh and everything is slightly offset. So, I mean, if you go look at that footage, you can notice that. Not to mention that the wave itself has a bow in it. You can measure the bow as it crosses the equator.
We've got someone over here that's really, really upset, and they got rid of their other question, but I'll see if I can remember their question. What will happen on here is on some of these shows where we're dealing with issues like that and things that contradict what you learn in school. You've got somebody who is really deep into that study on whatever level, and they just get really upset because this information really shatters their sense of reality and what is true. So this one is like, convince me, you can hear the attitude in this, convince me as a scientist and an expert on space that you are not totally deluded.
Well,
And
here's the problem. If you're a scientist, I can't convince you, because science is a club that refuses to look at this in any open-minded way. What they do is they come in assuming that it has to be a heat wave, or that it was left by an airplane of all things. And so my problem is, you are welcome to draw whatever conclusion you have. I think it's unfortunate that people get upset, but when you see people get upset, that is a very telling thing. I'm saying what I'm saying, but if someone contradicts me, I don't get upset about it. They have their right to think the way they do. Truth is I have had observatories contact me simply to tell me what a disgrace I am to the community of amateur astronomy. And in my view, that's what science, that's why I'm contacted by scientists. It makes no sense. If you look at what I've done and you wipe your slate clean, as you are supposed to, saying, I have no idea what this is, and you work from there, you will come up with the absolute conclusion that what I filmed should not exist, according to what modern science tells us.
And this is part of the reason that we have, hidden your identity and all this for security reasons, because you are going against mainstream, and they do not like it because they want the sheeple to know just a dumbed down version and a complete lie is what they want.
I don't protect my privacy because of some shadowy organization. I protect it because people get out of hand. They get so upset that I would have the nerve to state the things that I state, that they want to take some kind of retribution. And I've had, the lunar wave was, I think, the third or fourth video up on my channel, and it was very soon after that let's just say attention that I really didn't want started to come, and it makes no sense. If I'm just a crazy guy, then why waste the effort,
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. Yeah, I've got my share of haters. And they call me witches and satanic worshipers and all that kinds of stuff. It's kind of funny.
Sounds like you're in the wrong club.
I'm in the wrong club. That's right. Everybody knows what it's like to die that has not died, and I died, but they're telling me what it's supposed to be like. I think that's funny. And I don't know any of these people, so how does Crrow, does Crrow know about Dark Sky Watcher 74's moon viewing project? It seems like they'd make a great team. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, actually, you can see on my channel that, I don't know, 2014, I think, around one of the lunar eclipses, I had been in communication with him, and we actually did a clip where we demonstrated that the things I could see transiting the moon, he could see, and he's 500 miles away. Paul is a really nice man, but we have vastly different points of view. And to be honest, what I have chosen to do is be a member of nothing, literally nothing. I belong to nothing on this world, and I go at it from an individual point of view. And I find that whenever I try to work with other individuals, that very quickly agendas and the rules of the things we were taught in school all kind of intrude on what's being done. So what I do is I go out and do what I do. I present it out to the public, and people like Paul, they're great amateur astronomers. He's got the ability to do anything I've got to do. And yeah, we've talked many times. I think we just have a vastly different approach, and there it is. He's a nice man, though.
Yep, there's a lot of nice people out there on YouTube. Let's see. This one is, hey, Kelly, glad I made it to your interview. Hey. I have a question for Crrow. Has he ever seen the moon wane or wax from the wrong direction? Oh, and I've got an amendment to that too. I've looked up and the moon had a smiley face one time. It just had a little smiley
Yeah,
face on the bottom, and it's not like turned. So I don't know if that goes
yeah.
along with her question.
I think I can actually address that. What I noticed two maybe 2 years ago is so many people were commenting that the moon was in the wrong position in the sky, and I would go,
That's about when
what?
it was for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would go out and look, and I caught on to what's going on, and it's, for the most part, I think, a misconception if I am addressing this properly. What a lot of people don't know is that if you go out any given evening and watch the moon over 6 hours, it will rotate roughly 90 degrees. Most people have a concept of the moon as being fixed with the face we see locked towards us, which is true. But over about 6 hours, it will rotate about 90 degrees. But it also tilts slightly forward and tilts slightly back. And what this is called is libration, not liberation, but libration. If you go online and look up an animation for libration, L-I-B, they generally show you that kind of whole rotation process with the tilt forward and backwards. So I think what a lot of people get fooled by is they'll go out one night and they'll see that smiley face and say, wait a minute, the moon's upside down. And the truth is, astronomy doesn't help. Everything is so darn complicated. They can't ever just describe something in normal words in a normal way, and it really dissuades people from looking much further. But if you go online and look up an animation for liberation, you can probably pretty quickly find that 90-degree over 6 hour rotation with the tilt forward and backwards. Maybe that answers her question. I'm not sure.
Answered my question because I thought I was going crazy. The moon was smiling at me. So that makes me feel a lot better. Oh, let's see. They were asking, and I don't the name. I was trying to write it down, but I didn't get the spelling. So thank you very much for letting Kelli interview you. XOXO. I think I may have missed it, but what was the name of the Russian scientist you mentioned? Because I didn't get their name down completely.
Katim Alexander. His nickname is Hattie Bob. What you can do is go to my YouTube channel. There is a clip called "The Moon is an Illusion and Nobody Goes Above Low Earth Orbit." In the description of that video, there are some links translated and not translated to some of his stuff. But from those links, you can find everything that is findable.
Okay.
A lot of it, you'll have to use Bing and Google to translate. And for some reason, Russian is one language that doesn't translate well per se with the tools we're given, but it does the job well enough that you can kind of get the gist of things if you work at it. But I do have some translation links posted.
Fabulous. It's not a very romantic language either. It's a little harsh. The YouTube channel Conspiratruth has shared a couple videos showing multiple suns. I don't know anything about this. Given the theory that we are being transported, could this be the reality breaking through the facade?
I can say this. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started seeing a lot of comments come into my channel of people reporting two suns at sunset. Now, having done a lot of chemtrail work, what I noticed is that they are covering the sun all the time. You'll see chemtrails covering the sun, but a lot, depending on where you are. There, as a matter of fact, I have a friend on the east coast of this country who has not seen a sunset in 2 years because of chemtrailing. And so I had at one point gone on my channel and said, if you have the ability, film the sun at sunset. Let's try to find out what's going on here. But I think it is pretty clear that part of what we are seeing with chemtrail distribution is the intentional blocking of sunlight and the intentional blocking of our visibility of what may be a changing system, who knows. But I will further add, the very last thing I filmed with my solar telescope was what appeared to be a perfect reflection of the sun, roughly 5 sun widths away and a bit offset, almost as if it was a reflection off something above me. Now, when I filmed this, I didn't post the finding yet. I knew I had to do tests to make sure it wasn't lens flare or something else. I have not seen the sun since the day I posted that clip.
Wow, that's very telling.
Could be. Needs to be tested.
Wow. While you're answering the next question, I'll see if I can find a video of mine that I put up because everybody's freaking out about a second sun and posting all these videos. Look, here's the second sun. And I found out something by accident, and you can help me with my vocabulary on this. Like I said, I was working with very rudimentary, cameras, and also I would take my camera, and I didn't have the fancy lenses you screwed on because I don't think my camera is so old they don't even make them anymore to put on there. So I got one of those welder's glasses that you put on the welder's mask, and I taped it onto the front of my camera so that I could film the sun coming up in the morning to see if there were two suns or what was going on. So I set it up outside. I went inside, made some breakfast, and was getting ready. Then I went outside, and I looked on there. It was like, oh my gosh, there's two suns. I was like freaking out. So in the process of moving it, because the sun was moving, so I was moving my equipment. When I moved it, I touched that welder's glass, and it moved the welder's glass at kind of an angle. And when I did that, the second sun moved. And it was, I don't know if you call it a sundog or just a lens anomaly.
I'm not sure, but I can state categorically that there are an endless line of people reporting seeing similar things, and a lot of people equate it to Nibiru. And for the record, I don't take Nibiru very seriously. In my mind, it's been coming my whole life and never got here. It just seems to be another one of those things that is endlessly bandied about. Now, whether or not Nibiru is actually, like one person just came and said, what if the moon's Nibiru? And when I heard him say that, I thought, you know what? Now that's more palatable idea to consider for me. He was saying, well, when the moon, if it was placed here, we would have all this destruction down here. And he made all these points. Not that I'm saying they're correct. What I am saying is it is clear that people are reporting seeing two things instead of one when they look at the sun. It is clear that chemtrails are directly affecting our ability to see the sun or experience sunlight in all its glory, because it is blocking a heck of a lot of sunlight to this planet in places. So I think it's important that people pay attention and film whenever they can. And if you live in a place where you can see the western horizon, get out there and shoot some video. See, you might surprise yourself.
Here's the video. This is just a really short clip of the video, and you can see the sun. Sorry, the quality's bad. The sun, and then this thing on the side. So let me start the video. So this is when I figured it out. See how I'm pulling the lens down, the filter?
Yeah.
And it's going up and down. The second sun is going up and down as I'm moving that filter.
So that would usually indicate lens flare.
Exactly. And I think what was happening to everybody is their dark lens, they had screwed on there and fixed. It was fixed on their lens, so no matter what, that second sun stayed in the same place. And because I rigged mine and taped it on there.
It could be, but one thing you can do to rule out sun flare is to simply put a tube over the end of your lens. So you're shooting through a tube. They make hoods for cameras, but if you put a tube and shoot through the tube, it's not possible to pick up refraction, lens flare in that way. So that's one way. Hey, can I take a 30-second gentleman's break here?
Oh, you go for it.
I'll be right back.
Go
Sorry,
for it.
Drinking too much coffee.
Same here. So what do you guys think? Yes, this is awesome. You've got some good questions down here. Some of these are like repeat questions, so I might not be able to get to some of these. Let's see. Dark side of the moon. Oh my. Someone's talking about women are being kidnapped and brought to the dark side of the moon. They better not kidnap me and bring me to the dark side of the moon. They're going to have a whooping. We'll see what happens to them. On the flat earth theory, he was talking that he's not really into the flat earth theory and all that. but there are some aspects to it that make sense. Basically, what he was saying is whether the Earth is flat or something else, it's just not what they said it was. That was his point on that. And you guys have got some good questions. Awesome questions. And let me scroll back up to the
Okay,
top.
I'm back. Much better.
Yay, yay. Yeah, this is not like radio where I can like play a song or something and, and then walk away for a while. Uh, Now, here's somebody that's having some psychological issues about this, and this is kind of a big deal, and partly why I think you're doing what you're doing, and trickling down a little bit, giving them a little bit of information, allowing them a little time to adjust, and then introducing more information, because you got kind of the when you put stuff up there, but a lot of people have to adjust to something new when they have learned since they were in kindergarten something is a certain way, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, this, I don't know what is going on, but it is not at all what I learned. They've got some psychological stuff to work through, but psychologically it can be pretty scary to think the moon and other space objects are not what we think they are, especially when we think of them as a part of a control system. How do you stay sane believing corruption goes even beyond this planet? So they're kind of freaking out.
That's a darn good question. That to me is a critically important question because it addresses the vast majority of people out there who are just trying to raise a family, just trying to get through life with all the obstacles that are thrown in front of us. I will start to answer this question by saying, you should not believe a darn thing I tell you just because I tell you it. I hope that you will consider the things that I say and go out and use your own given ability to determine what is feasible using disparate experience in your life to actually observe something and quit accepting what textbooks, what Crow, what everybody is pouring in at you. The only thing that you can do is to hear what's going on and then consider it in your own life. The way I live my life and the way that I allowed the blinders to fall off my eyes was one day when I realized things are not right. I made the commitment to stop believing in everything I had ever been told. From that day forward, 1 and 1 no longer added up to 2 until I could critically think about it, and on my own, free of outside influence, I could make a decision on whether or not I knew enough to call 1 and 1 2. Of course, that's a simple example, and it doesn't take long to put 2 fingers up and say, yep, that's 2. But if you can do this over a year or so, you begin to get an entirely different view. It's almost like seeing for the first time. And in doing that, your intuition will wake back up. Maybe some people have never had intuition. But the threat along the way is that the system will constantly try to pull you back to your comfortably built lifetime. All the things that you came to believe were true over a lifetime. Constantly, you'll be tempted to say, to heck with this, I'm just going back to everything I knew. Now, an animal might get sucked into that. A human being has the ability to persevere and stick to their guns. If you can stick to doing this for an extended period of time, like a year, you will begin to see. During this process, the initial shock of understanding that everything that is being thrust at you through a television is false, that much of the bases that you have foundationally built your life on were false, you gradually come to understand. It's almost like the 5 stages of grieving in a way. You know, you're going to be upset at a point. You're going to deny it at a point. You're going to come to grips with it at a point. And at a certain stage, you just come to understand, you know, today is no different than it was 20 years ago. I just know something different. So that's maybe the best way I can answer that.
That's a really good way to answer that, because it's tough finding out things are not the same. It's like your parents coming up and saying, "Oh, by the way, you were adopted." What? I thought you were my parents this whole time. No. You were also talking about 1 + 1 = 2. Does it really? We had a discussion about math yesterday, you and I.
We did, you know, and it kind of underscores you know, it's pretty clear that the system of deception we live in was built by people who understand the reality of things. I mean, what you and I were talking about is, what if it was something as basic as we use a base 10 math system? Now, we're told the Sumerians used base 60. What if a base 10 math system simply will allow you to go so far and no further? I mean, what if it was something that basic? And while I'm not saying this is the key to it all, I'm using an analogy here to kind of underscore that, you know, we are locked into systems that we are forced to use, like an alphabet, like math. You know, these are things that we don't have a substitute for. So we're kind of stuck in these systems to try to reach further than we currently have. And it's quite possible that the very system, it's not just possible. In my view, it is almost absolutely true that the systems we've been handed to work within will allow us to go to a certain point, but no further.
Mhm. And they disrupt what our bodies naturally do. I mean, we're supposed to be here. We were talking about the octaves. You know, we've got the vibe here on this planet. We're supposed to be here. And when you are truly in tune with what is going on, then you can access information that is difficult to access if you are being mind controlled or you're under control. And along with the math, because math just kind of went boom, you know, in front of my face, because nothing really makes much sense till it comes to geometry. Then you get into geometry, it's like, oh, I'm understanding now, because it's very spatial, and you see it that way. But then when you start to put the numbers to it, there are generations of kids right now that are having a difficulty with math, just despite the fact they're trying to make it difficult, because their brains don't work that way. They're so highly intelligent. I ran a school with kids who were ADD, ADHD, and dyslexic and high-functioning autistic kids. And once they got the big picture of math, then they were easily able to apply these symbols to it. So the math, I think they have it the way it is to disrupt our systems and for it not to be natural. Also, the clocks. You know, why are there 60 minutes in an hour? Why are there 24 hours in a day? What about your calendar? You know, why did we divide it up into roughly, you know, 30 days per month, 12 months, and then why do we have a week is 7 days? You know, all of this is done, and when you're born into a system, you don't ever question that system. Well, that's just the way it is because that's the best system, but it's not when you start to look at all these individual systems.
Well, what you're pointing out here is actual systematic targeting to pull people out of a natural cycle.
Yes.
Now, in the Western world, we're kind of taught that time is linear. In a lot of other places of the world, time is cyclical. Now, if you go back to Julius Caesar, one of the first person we're aware of to screw up our calendar and move our actual beginning of the year, which should be March, should be the first month of the year, he moved it to January. And then you have this Pope Gregory, he took it a bit further and, you know, made an arbitrary year zero, or there was no year zero, year one. And then they divided up our calendar into 12 months, which doesn't evenly divide the year. But to take that a step further, if a circle is based in nature on the amount of time it takes us to go around the sun, then basically a circle should represent a year, right? Well, our circle is 360 degrees, yet we know it takes 365-ish days to divide up the year. So at the very base of mathematics based on a circle, it's out of step with the reality we're in. It's that simple. And even when you look at the Mayans, you know, I think they had something like 13 months of 20 days or something, a much more even division where they were left with a remainder of 5 that they dealt with in a particular way. But the point is way back then, their calendar was more accurate than ours is today because we're still throwing leap years and these other ridiculous things. And then to top it off, they throw us into daylight saving time to ensure they knock off your circadian rhythm twice a year.
Yeah, I hate daylight savings time, and there's no use for it. The reason they gave us in the first place was, oh, because of farmers, you know, so that they could have more daylight to go,
you know, here's something to consider. You know, there's a quote from an Indian who, when first heard about daylight savings time, he said only a white man would cut a foot off the bottom of a blanket sew it to the top and think he'd change something.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a farmer, because my family had land, you know, miles and miles of land, and you don't get up by the clock. You get up when the rooster crows, when the sun comes up, and that's when you go. So why do you need a daylight savings time? The farmers get up.
That's not what daylight savings time is about. Daylight savings time is about something else altogether.
Oh yeah, that's another part of the lie. And that's why it's so hard for people to get their heads wrapped around this, is because of the assumption of all the stuff to be true, just because they've known it their whole life. Mm-mm-mm. Oh, you mentioned chemplanes, chemtrails, and all that.
Yep.
Do you know what the chemplanes contain? Indianapolis has lots of airports, but I see those planes quite often leaving clouds in the sky. Sometimes there's more than one leaving grids. Is it targeting certain people? Is it deadly? Should I be concerned? I have something on top of that. The chemtrails, I have seen so much footage out there of a chemtrail being made, and there's no airplane in front of it. Or this ball will appear, and then it will disappear, and then something that kind of looks like a plane, but there's no wings, and then it will go away. So what have you, looking at the sky, what do you know about these chemtrails and the planes?
The biggest problem with talking about chemtrails is we have so many people wildly speculating, which is not helping people to understand that it's a real thing. I live in an international airport flight path for the last 10 years. Actually,
I have too, DFW.
Yeah, I have never once seen a commercial airliner leave a contrail or a chemtrail. Now, there is plenty of research out there that claims the modern high bypass jet engine isn't really capable of leaving any significant contrail. And the main argument about chemtrails is they're simply contrails, which is a flat out lie. I have spent probably thousands of hours filming chemtrails. Now, to get back to the previous part of that question, in the global lab results that people have done, and there have been lab tests all over this planet, there are 3 heavy metals that seem to be common. God, I can't...
So aluminum, because we had our
aluminum, barium, strontium, or something like this. You can look it up. But anyhow, if you consider, you know, you asked if they're good for you. Well, spraying any kind of a man-made substance into the air on particularly these 3 mentioned things, where a certain part per million is not even legal to do, what you find is, of course, it's not good for us. Now, what are they doing with them? Well, I've been looking at the age of deception for a lot of years now, and what I find is any given thing they are doing is a bit like a hydra. It has many things that it's doing at once. On the face of it, it is very clear to me that they're blocking a heck of a lot of sunlight. Sunlight's an important thing for living organisms on this planet. Beyond that, weather manipulation is actually documentable. I can go right now online and show you an Air Force document with the title something like Owning the Weather in 2024 or 25. This is a stated purpose of the Air Force. I think it's pretty clear that some of the HARP installations have to do with this kind of milky white deck that chemtrails make in the sky so that they can bounce frequencies through it. And as a radio operator that I was in the Marine Corps, I know something about bouncing radio waves off the ionosphere. So while I can't directly answer your question, what I can say is it does not help to wildly speculate, but what we do know is that there are heavy metals that are not good for us. It is blocking a lot of sunlight, and it is clearly attached to weather manipulation, among other things.
Yeah, and we had an organic garden. I'm trying to remember, it was like 8 or 10 years ago. And like the first year, the leaves on the zucchini plant were this big. They were huge, and we did really well. And they've been chemtrailing for a while, but that's when they started to really heavily chemtrail. And every year, our crops would be less abundant. They wouldn't grow as well. And we'd had our soil tested every year, and some of the heavy metals that you're talking about were in our soil. And they started to accumulate more and more and more. And also the pH changed of the soil. Well, as a result of some of the aluminum and all that, the pH changed in our soil, where we can't even grow a garden in our backyard anymore. And
Well,
we
I
have
mean,
problems with
it's a
that.
scary thing to consider when, so many places on this planet now have fluoride in their water. If, the average person looks at what's in your food at the grocery store, it's almost like they're creating another species. I mean, there are reports out that show that male sperm count is down 60% over the past decade or so. Who knows what the effect of being exposed to so much artificial kind of chemically substances is, but it's not lost on me that in the modern age, the ability of technology, there are people on this planet who understand full well what is going on, and engineering these things. So there it is. And if that is not a good reason to kind of come to understand the age of deception that we are living in now and has been going on through known history, as far as I can tell, um, it's a bit like the Matrix movie where Morpheus says to Neo, if you're not free of the Matrix, then you are potentially an agent of the Matrix. And I'm writing another article that will go up on Higher Side Chats this Friday that is all about the age of deception. That is what 6 pages are about.
This is Chris Garner. By the way, Crow, I really like the video "Attacks Do Not Change Facts." I would like to commend you on the confidence in which you defend your research. Please keep the great information coming. Thank you for your work. So,
Well, thank you, Chris. It's always nice to hear a positive mind out there, because it wears you down over time dealing with just the high level of kind of coordinated negativism. I mean, there's a channel out there right now that the last 24 videos on his channel is just dedicated to trashing, Crrow777. So thank you so much, Chris.
wow, I've got those too. Those videos out there, it's like, really? Oh boy, people have nothing better to do. Do planetary alignments interfere with the energy between the Earth and the Moon? People are predicting an earthquake tomorrow in California based on planetary alignments. Supposedly, there are natural disasters which the planets when I'm sorry. I don't know what I need to get my smart girl glasses on today. There are natural disasters when planets align between the Earth and the Moon.
I don't buy it for a second. I think almost everything you've been told about tectonic plates and earthquakes is complete hokum. I think, if you consider the level of technology and that they can't possibly predict an earthquake at this point, or even really tell you much more than tectonic plates are slipping, it's complete fallacy. And as a matter of fact, I have lived in Southern California my entire life. I've been through quite a few earthquakes in my day. The biggest earthquake I was in was on Easter of all days of 2010. Now, the thing about that quake is they played it up and it shook for quite a while. The best footage the news could muster was water sloshing in a pool, and I forget the size of it, but the magnitude was up there. And anyone who understands the Richter scale, if you're told we had a 7.0 and then a 7.1, the 7.1 is 10 times stronger. So if you consider what moving up the Richter scale means, is that the next quake up is a heck of a lot bigger. But happening on Easter and experiencing it was really what began to wake me up to what earthquakes are, particularly when you look at the Russian research and the things he says about Easter Day, when the Catholic Church is smearing ash on the foreheads of all its followers, right over their pineal gland, smearing ash.
Oh, that's profound. Wow. Now, on the earthquakes, I have been subscribed to Dutch Sense, and I don't know if you know who he is. He does a lot of looking at the moon. I'm sorry, looking at the sun. And he, over the years I've been following him, he has predicted earthquakes, and they happen. But it has to do with solar flares and the things that go on the sun. Is that something you're familiar with, or does that work in with the theories you have, or the proof that you've got for these earthquakes?
I have a very close friend who follows that gentleman and has been very impressed with his work. I can't really comment on it because I'm not familiar. But I can give people an alternative perspective, which I think is critical to look at, because there is no doubt of the numerical encoding in all the deception we see, particularly in the news. There's a young gentleman by the name of Zachary Hubbard, who runs a YouTube channel. If you search for Zachary Hubbard or Zach Hubbard in numerology, he just recently did a clip using gematria, Jewish gematria, simple numerology, to actually use that method to predict an earthquake for tomorrow. Don't know whether all these things are going to pan out. I'm not here to tell you that I am backing these things. What I am saying is what this gentleman is attempting to do is part of the new vanguard of people on YouTube decoding the age of deception. So he bears, it bears looking at what he's doing. And whether or not you agree with the assumptions or conclusions, the important thing is to observe what he is trying to do. That is what's critical. You see so many people like the flat earth, they're going to fight over whether it's convex or flat, when at the very base of what they're doing, they're all saying the description we've been handed is wrong. It makes no sense. And that's why I don't belong to communities, and I will not belong to communities. Getting back to Zach, he's using the numerical coding system that he is attempting to decode, and I think it bears witness. It is a good thing for people to bear witness so that they understand that there is, in fact, a numerical coding to almost everything that goes on.
Mm-hmm. And numerical coding, could that, another word for that be like frequency?
Well, it's whenever you've created a code system, like you look at 9/11 and how it's been echoed in movies, even decades before it happened, it's been echoed after. You consider what is being done here, and the only thing you can logically deduce is that there's clearly a system in place that requires things to happen on a given date, echoes to occur before it, echoes to occur after it, and then preceding events that will tie in to previous events. So it's a system of some sort. So I suppose it would be easy to consider somehow this ties in with systems of octaves, or Lord only knows.
Yeah, we've all got, and this is what you find out. Everybody's got their own vocabulary that they use, and people argue over these vocabularies. And what I try to do is paint a picture, and instead of using vocabulary words, because that's where I think people start butting heads when you use the wrong vocabulary word. So I try to use as many as possible. We've got somebody, is there an explanation as to why some people feel a connection to the moon?
I think what we see in the modern age, well, let me go at this in a different way. When I first set up my YouTube channel, I saw so many people commenting, to hell with the people who don't get it. And when I first started my YouTube channel, I thought, wow, I really don't agree with that. We need all these people. You don't just leave behind a huge part of your population saying, I'm sorry, you can't understand, to hell with you. And I really took issue with that. As I got years into this, what I came to understand is that the majority of our population is not catching on. And so the truth of it is that when you go out to speak, as we're speaking now, you're primarily speaking to people who either are getting a clue, have a clue, or simply understand. To be frank, you got to do the best you can, communicate in a way that helps people to begin to see the complete veil that has been cast over what we call life on this planet, and understand that there are going to be large groups of people, whether they're genetically that way, whether, in the Russian research, it claims that there's 3 genome types on this planet, and that starting in 2009 and ending in 2012, there would be over 5 billion people whose brains would no longer be updated by the system. Now, I'm not sure what you do with that, but when you consider what we see, considering, excuse me, that the vast majority of people are not catching on, it's almost like their brains are not being updated. How can they not see that all this news is false when it's been demonstrated so clearly? How can you not understand that the moon landings have been presented with false video when it's really been, dissected to the point where there's no question? It's just a matter of what you choose to believe. And, what the moon plays into, I've already said, the moon is a control system. So there it is.
Hmm. And I think it's also what people get used to and they spend a lot of time doing. A lot of people spend a lot of time on the television. And I remember in college one time, I had never watched soap operas, but I started watching a certain soap opera, I think As the World Turns or one of those, in college. And at the first, it was like, really, this is the worst acting I have ever seen. And then you start to get into it. And then, one of the characters died, and I just bawled like a baby and, threw myself on the television. No, no, he died. And anyway, so then I did something else, and I got away from the soap operas. And it was a few years later. Somebody was flipping through the channels. I'm like, oh my gosh, As the World Turns or whichever one it was. I was like, oh my gosh, let me see that, see if the same characters are on there. And then you look at it again and you go, oh my gosh, that is the worst acting I've ever seen. How did I ever, get in my head that this was true or real life? So I think people get conditioned.
Well, what's scary about television and all modern technology is people simply do not understand what is possible with flicker rates, frequencies, colors, because colors can basically be broken into frequency, sound, the combinations of these things, sigils, just all kinds of stuff coming at you out of that box, even when it's turned off, the frequencies that can be generated from just the energy in it. And what tends to happen, I heard it described very well by a gentleman once, as he referred to it as marinating people. It marinates you to prepare you for an eventuality that you will then accept and then play a role in unknowingly. And I cover this in the article that's about to be published on Higher Side Chats, where I do a thought experiment and I stipulate there's a newscast going on, and it's a horrible event that's being shown on this newscast. It's 100% false, completely made up. I stipulate that. The person watching the newscast assumes that it is all true. Then that person goes to work and talks to people all day long about this made up false event that was presented on the news. And then I ask the question, is this person a liar? Has this person told unknowingly lies? Has this person furthered the lie that was propagated by that false news report? And I ask these thought experiment questions to kind of demonstrate. And the truth is that there is no better place to see the encoding of our planet than there is in TV and movies. But it is a trap. If you get sucked in and are being entertained, you no longer have the ability to see detail. And let me tell you something, the devil is in fact in the details. And if you can't see them, then you're walking around blind.
Yeah, logic and reason goes out the window. We haven't watched television for 10 years plus. And I went over to my friend's an attorney, and they have one of these new televisions. And I don't know what the technology is, but it looks like the ones on the television are in the room with you. It's like, I've never seen anything like this before. And I had a hard time looking away. And I'm like, that's why I don't watch television, because if I can't just easily look away from something, something is drawing me in and trying to do something against my will.
Yeah, it hypnotizes you. People can look into flicker rates, frequency, all the things that can be done, but you better understand that sigils and other darker things are being flashed at people. And what people also don't understand, like if you were to look at, say, medieval concepts of what black magic was, it was best applied when people were in a high emotional state. And that's in fact what a rock concert, what a enthralling movie, what a television show will heighten your emotional susceptible state and then deliver whatever it is it's delivering. And when you combine sigils, colors, music, sounds, frequency, flicker rates, all these things, it is akin to programming human beings in a very predictable and repeatable way. I just did a past article that is posted on Higher Side Chats about the weaponization of music, which officially occurred in 1939 by the Rothschilds and the the other group that you always hear about, Rockefellers, and the role that the military played in that, and how RCA came to be as basically a front for all this weaponization of media, which never stopped. And what you find is that all modern, in 1939, orchestral A, the A that you tune your instruments to, was changed to 440 cycles a minute. Now, what they changed it away from was 432 cycles a minute, which corresponds with the Fibonacci sequence, or how a leaf grows, how nature proceeds. Now, in doing that simple 8 vibration change, what they did was created tones that are more aggressive and heighten the effect on a human being. And you can look this up online, that there are whole huge populations on this planet that are downloading devices that will retune their music back to 432 on their iPods. There are people within the music industry that are working to undo this very damaging weaponization of music. But when you consider that this was done in 39 with music, then you better be able to add 1 and 1 and understand what a television is doing.
Oh yeah, that's something else. And in the music, using my psychic abilities, I was able to detect, and I wonder when this started as well, to detect like demonic type entities that they have put into the music. That once you play the music, they can either possess people or influence people. And I was one of those. It's like, okay, I hear this, I want to see if it's true or not. So I would play the videos and see if there were any entities attached to it, and there were. So I wonder when they started doing that as well.
Well, I can't speak directly to that, but what I can say is that if you're a person who understands when you're listening to the radio and a song like Hotel California comes on, and that song seems to stand out from everything you've just heard over the last hour, if you think it's just because that song was cleverly written, you are sadly mistaken. There is a reason that that song gets the response from people that it does. There's even a Seinfeld episode that makes fun of us using Eagles music. Desperado. The song Desperado is used in this Seinfeld episode, that when this guy hears it, he just completely zones out and starts staring into space. And so one of the main characters says, well, I want to have a song. Can we use Witchy Woman as her example? And at the end of that episode, it shows a surgeon operating on someone, and the song Witchy Woman comes on, and he drops his scalpel and goes into a zone. But what I'm telling you is if you can pay attention closely enough, that when certain songs like that come on, there is a reason why they have kind of stood the test of time and are always the number one thing, and just kind of have that different effect on you. It's not simply because it was a cleverly well-written song. There is much more to it than that.
Yeah, that Hotel California gets me every time. You're right about that. It comes on, and I go into a trance when that comes on. Oh my goodness, I gotta be careful. Now we were talking about the atmosphere of the moon, or that there is no atmosphere, or there is an atmosphere, and I can't remember the name of this, but I've seen it on YouTube. There's the videos out there. I think someone pirated it or something. But this guy, he had worked with color. I don't know if he was an artist or digital artist, and he saw that when you can take a black and white picture, that you can look at the different shades of the black and white and gray, and you can correspond them to like different colors of green or yellow or different colors like that. So he took pictures of planet Earth basically in black and white, and then took the same picture, I guess, with the color on it, and then had a computer program. And then they took the pictures of the moon and applied the same concept of, here's black and white, but if we apply the colors to the black and white, then suddenly you see a completely different moon than you thought. That there are plants on it, there's lights, all of a sudden you can see spaceships, the ones that look like donuts with the hole in the middle. Those are all over the place. And suddenly you can see streets and buildings and cities and all of these things that and bodies of water that you couldn't see before. Have you seen what I'm talking about, or know anything about that?
No, I haven't seen it, but I mean, people have seen Danny Wilton's work and other things where, you finally, you're seeing demonstrated things that should not have been known back in the year when they were put together. But not only that, that all this imagery is held within this thing that doesn't appear to hold any imagery at all. And while my concept of the moon is that it's a technology that's far beyond anything we have words to describe it with, it would not surprise me to find out that there's a whole, lexicon of imagery that could be brought forward at any time.
Now, on this planet, and this is kind of putting the flat Earth theory aside, there are other theories like our planet is hollow, or it's not just a big floating rock like the moon. So, do you have anything in your head, even if it can't be backed up by science? Do you have kind of your own little picture in your head of what you think this planet is that we're on? Do you think that it's a spaceship that's projecting what we're doing? Do you think it is a big rock? What are your theories?
What I will say in public is that it is perfectly clear to me that where we live has been misdescribed. I will say that much. In terms of putting a model around it, we don't really have a way to know that, do we? We just don't. You could do experiments like I do. I go out and do firsthand things to try to know what I know. If people wanted to prove the flat Earth or other things, they should go out and do physical hands-on things that demonstrate something to help them build a picture of the model. Having said this, there's not many things. Well, I'll come at this in a different way. It's simply not described as you have been told. And if you take the time to discard all the things you have accepted as true all your life and come back at it and observe for yourself, you will begin to understand that. And while it is more important to understand that where you live has been improperly and erroneously, intentionally misdescribed, it is more important to know that than physically what it looks like. Because once enough people know that there is error, then over time, a more complete picture will form. But in my view, it's just, you might be able to theorize what you think it looks like, but you're putting a theory out there. That's what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I've seen a lot of videos where there are, sometimes they're different shapes, but most of the time what I've seen is they're kind of circular or round, these objects that go in front of the moon. Or I think you might say they're on the surface of the moon. So do you know what these are? Do you have a theory as to what these are? And how do you know that these actually are going across the surface of the moon and are not something in these, 160 miles or however whatever
Okay.
distance it really is to the moon?
So to clear up some misconceptions, to my knowledge, I have never filmed anything near the moon except the lunar wave. I consider these things all to be in low Earth orbit. And to take that a step further, what is fascinating about them is we are told things in low Earth orbit travel thousands of miles an hour. So I see the opposite in what we are told in these objects. If we consider that something further away should be smaller, the further away it is, the slower it should be traveling. But what I have seen is the opposite of that. I see things that appear to be bigger, which must mean they're closer, which must mean they're faster, but they're actually bigger and slower. So the rules of how orbits work don't really work with this thing. But the main thing is they don't look like anything that we've been shown. I have filmed a few satellites that we can identify, and they look pretty much like you'd expect. They have solar wings, and they're humming along at a huge speed. They cross the moon in about a second. So what are these black round objects that look like they have a magnetic halo around them? I've shot them, others have shot them, and they don't look like anything they've been shown. To me, they're almost certainly part of deception. Why else would it be that we don't know what they are? And why else would it be that if I can shoot these things all the time with my equipment, that places like NASA, who are actually supposed to be informing us, have never said anything about them?
Yep, we have the acronym NASA. We have several things that we call them, but I can't say some of them. in mixed company. They're not complimentary. I'll just put it that way. Let's see. Crow said people spoke of time before the moon. Did any of those people say how it got there and by whom, etc.?
The only person that I'm aware of is Katim Alexander or Hadibov. What I'm about to say is his research. I, as a human being, have no way to vet it. I will probably not in my lifetime have any way to vet it. What Hadibov claims is that the moon was put in place in 18,000 BC. He further states that we have no history before the year 1, that it's all just made up. He has things to say about other history, but claiming that the moon was put there in 18,000 BC, he says one other interesting thing, which I think is pertinent to this conversation. He did a study on the Great Pyramid, which he calls the Pyramid of Cheops. There is an opening in the Great Pyramid, I think it might be the front opening or something, I forget, that is supposed to align with the North Star or a particular star in that constellation, but I think it's the North Star. It's more than a degree off. And so what the Egyptologists have said is that proves it's just the ceremonial opening that was never really meant to perfectly line at everything. What Hadibov did was he calculated the tilt and angle of our planet without the moon, and what he found was that that alignment perfectly comes back into sync. Without the moon, his calculations show that the Earth would allow that opening in the pyramid to line up with the star that he believes it was intended to. His conclusion was that that is proof that the pyramid is a marker that's been here since before we've had a moon. But again, and I cannot stress it enough, that is the Russian research, and I cannot vet, prove, disprove any of it. I am simply telling you what this gentleman said.
We've got some interesting comments over here. Crow sounds like the Matrix has us. We got a little panic going on with everybody. Because that is what happens. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but once you start to see that, even if you don't know what's going on, just the fact that something is different than what I learned, I see a lot of trust issues coming up here. Like, oh my gosh, who can I trust now? And they feel kind of like, I'm flailing on my own.
Stop right there. Let me try to address this in just a level-headed way. Yeah, the Matrix has you. The Matrix has me. The Matrix has the President of the United States. The Matrix has the Queen of England. The Matrix has your dog. The Matrix has your bed. There is nothing here that is not in this system. But here's what you've got to consider. When you were 5 years old, was anything different? You just weren't aware of it. So I ask you, would you rather be in this system and blind to it without any hope of improving your situation, or would you rather be aware of it with the possibility that you can further your cause and have control of your destiny? Nothing is different today than it was yesterday before you ever heard me talk. Nothing has changed, except you may know a few things you didn't know before. So there is absolutely no reason to be afraid, to be depressed. The simple truth is, you can either choose to shut it all off and go back to sleep and live your life in bliss, or be aware and try to further your position and your control in the situation we find ourselves in. There's absolutely no reason to be afraid or depressed, because nothing is any different than it was 100 years ago, or maybe even 1,000 years ago, except what you know.
And I think that's a big reason that people reject this information without even doing any research, is because they can't handle knowing something different. So I think that's where a lot of the anger that I'm seeing, and people are scared crapless over here. Oh my goodness. This is kind of an obvious question, but why fake the moon landing? I guess they're asking, what's the agenda? What's the purpose in faking the moon landing?
I could sit here and I could regurgitate a bunch of assumptions that doesn't really help you much. I can't tell you exactly why it led to this. I guess we can understand that there was a period in our history when it was pretty clear there was going to be a space age. Maybe it came to that. I don't know exactly why they were willing to tell such a large lie. It seems to me that of all the deceptions I've seen, this one is almost one of the more poorly fashioned, because Weren't they aware that we were all going to have computers at some point and be able to review endlessly everything they'd hand us and find all the flaws in what we'd been told? I don't know why they did it, but they were not alone. You know, everyone acts like Russia and the US were in a space race. That is demonstrably false. We put our boot on the moon, so Russia, who spent all this treasure, blood, and effort, just said, okay, guys, the Americans made it, let's go home. And then they never put a man on the moon. It just, none of it makes sense. I wish I could answer that in a more direct fashion. I can't tell you why they lied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just wanted virtual bragging rights. Who knows? And why they lie to us about everything else. Mm-hmm.
So, Kelly, I think I got about 10 more minutes here.
Sure. Yeah, we're about to wrap it up. Now, the planets, about 2 more questions. The planets that we see. Now, I've been outside of this, and I've seen a lot of things out there, including a place where planets are made and all that. But it appears to me, I mean, this is how I'm looking at it, is that we are in something that is enclosed, and we are, like someone said, being transported somewhere else. But I look at your videos, and there was one last night I was looking at where you were looking at Saturn. Oh, that was beautiful. Your shots of Saturn, that was way cool. So is that really Saturn? Is that a projection on a dome? And how would we find that out? How would we know?
The only way that I can possibly answer that question is to say the following. What I do is I do not accept any description of space that I've been handed. And I use my own eyeballs to determine what I'm able to determine, which is, frankly, not nearly enough. When I look at these planets, I don't accept the descriptions of those planets I've been handed. Further, I understand that there is a complete subtext-coded message in all the media we see that is chattering about everything being false. Hard to know. But what I do is I say I will look at them, learn what I can. I can't tell you what they are. I can tell you that I'm shooting something. I can't tell you if it's physically there in the way it's been described, but I do not accept any of the descriptions of space we've been handed.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted you on the show, is because you are very, very scientific, and you don't venture outside of that very much, and that's how you maintain your credibility. So thumbs up to you on that. And for the last question, sorry about everybody else. There's probably about 150 questions over here they want to know.
How many questions do you have there? Do you have just a load?
No, about 150. But I'm just going to ask you one.
I'll tell you what, Kelly, I'll make you an offer. You know, I don't want to cut people short, and I know I'm not always accessible. I will go to 11:30, but if I do, I really have to kill it right then. 11:30 my time.
Oh no, we'll have to stop before then, because we'll have 200 questions by then, and it'll keep getting deep. So we need to.
Okay.
We'll wrap this up.
I just
maybe coming on again. I mean,
well, that's certainly a possibility. I just don't want to snub people who are taking the effort to try to know things.
Oh no, we can't get through 150 questions. Trust me, it's gonna be too hard.
Okay.
Here's this one. I would like to know, what are the main obstacles Crow finds doing his research? I mean, interferences from outside sources like chemtrailing, online and real life stalking, those kinds of stuff too. So nice you got an interview with him, Kelly. Crow is awesome.
In terms of physical hardships, weather manipulation, I have not been able to film for 3 weeks, and there is rarely a time here when we don't see chemtrails, although recently we have seen a lot of rain, which is rare for us in California, in our worst drought ever on record, I think. So the ability for the sky to close in just a few minutes. The other night when I shot Saturn, you could see that the visibility in my video is going south. Within 15 minutes, the entire sky closed. These are not normal things to me. In terms of community of people making it hard, you see organized attacks. You have channels out there who steal my videos and then try to demonstrate that I'm basically committing fraud and been faking everything, when I have my channel trailer makes a promise that I will never fake video, and I never will. Then you have channels that, you know, will have the last 24 videos they've done on me. But more than that is, you know, I'm not really a kind of duplicitous person that needs to hide my identity. But unfortunately, what we find is there are people out there who want to take an interest in you to the point where they will interfere with where you're working, where you're living. And so there's that. But the truth is, you know, none of that really matters. You just keep doing what you do. You do the best you can. You work with the hand you're dealt. And as you can see over the history of my channel, you do make progress. But you've got to make the commitment to actually open your eyes and start looking at the details of this place.
Yeah, and you have to be fearless. On some level, that's the only way that I
You
can
know
do
what?
it.
I would like to address that.
Mhm.
There is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. You know, we get these pictures painted of back in the old UFOs investigations, people got killed. I'm saying poppycock. If you kill people, there is a karmic result from that action. And the people in charge know this. And it is absolutely the reason our armies are staffed by 18-year-old kids and not old men. You know, what they're basically doing is coercing someone else to do their killing for them. And that killing doesn't happen on near the scale you're told it does. And if this was such a violent, fearful world, why would they need to produce all this false news of trains derailing, planes crashing, 9/11 happening? It goes on and on and on for the simple truth that they need to instill fear in people. And I'm here to tell you that I operate completely free of fear. Completely. I don't give it a second's thought. There is nothing to be afraid of other than, to steal a man's cliched statement, fear itself. If you're afraid of things, it's because you've been convinced there's something to be afraid of. But I will ask everyone listening, how many people do you know, do you meet in a daytime that want to harm you? When I go out in a day, I meet new people, and they're cool, they're interesting. And then I come home and turn on the news, and all I see is bad, bad, kill, kill, rape, rape. And what I see being projected doesn't even remotely resemble the world that I see when I go out. So I will ask you in closing here, when you go out in a day, do you meet people that want to beat you up and knife you and kill you and harm you and, you know, commit rape? You know, there's people out there in the world that may have these issues, but they are the minority to the millionth participle of a percent. So that's what I would say.
And that goes along with the system that they have in place. Has to do with the type of beings that we are. We are creator beings, and we are in a universe where you have free choice and free will inside this universe. And what I found, even when I died, the guy was like, "Come this way. This is the way to go." And then he's like, "It's your time to go." And you know, I told the guy, "No, it's not my time to go. I have to go back." And without any fighting or effort or anything, I started to go back to my body. I mean, that's the ultimate, and they could have just sucked me up in that tube and took me. And because I said no, that they didn't. And it shows how the systems work, as above, so below. The systems on this planet need the permission of the people for it to work.
That's what fear does. That's what this fear-based system is largely about, to heighten your emotional state, to make you susceptible to influence, negative, dark, and otherwise, and to keep you afraid. I mean, I can remember a time when getting on an airplane was a fun thing. It isn't that way anymore. There have been so many fake airplane crashes lately that you can only imagine how many people in this country are terrified to even go near a plane. There's no reason for it. You know, part of becoming an enlightened individual and an individual who is going up the ladder instead of stuck in stasis or going down the ladder is to shed fear. Until you shed fear, you are not really moving forward. And this whole system is built to instill fear, and it's a false system. See through it. Don't buy into it. People are basically good. And while there are bad apples out there, the vast majority of us are just people living, trying to raise a family. You know, that's the truth.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much. Oh, my cat. Tiffany, seriously? Sorry. Thank you so much for being on the show. Oh, she doesn't break anything under there. I've got some breakable things over there. I really appreciate you being on, and let's see if we can get you on again, because we've got even more questions now from when we had 150. I told you that would happen. And see if we can get you on again and ask some more questions, because I think we thoroughly covered the moon here and everything that we could scientifically. And as you get more stuff that you can tell us, I would love for you to share that with with us as well on future shows. So thank you so much, and thank you guys for tuning in to the show and asking some really good questions here. And if you would like for Crow to come on the show again, please let us know in the comments and have some questions, because I know we couldn't cover all your questions. So if you could put them down there, your questions, then we'll have kind of a direction for the next show when we have him on. So, and if you guys want to see him write a book, put it in the comments too. We got to get a book out on this, make this legit. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here, and thank you again to Crow for being such a gracious guest. And I will see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye-bye.